It all starts with the fact that the life of this story was given to doom. The girl didn't want to live as a villain. She just wanted to find a fiancé and live a happy long life. It's the deepest dream she's ever desired with all her heart. But it wasn't as beautiful as she'd imagined and dreamed. The girl didn't expect her boyfriend to turn against her at some point and stop trusting. And what was most amazing was that he believed from the first second that she could betray her country. But by the time Ariana started to realize what was going on and what had happened to him, it was too late. By his cold stare, the girl noticed at once how much he had changed towards her. When suddenly, he decided not to hide his emotions any longer, and told her the whole truth with a smile on his face. It turns out the girl mistakenly believed this relationship was nothing more than a political strategy. This guy was so good at pretending, Ariana never noticed anything suspicious about his behavior. When he had already told the whole truth, began to say that Ariana Emanuel, daughter of the Marquis Emanuel, was charged with high treason, and is condemned to horrible tortures that will inevitably result in his death. Thus she was betrayed by her own fiancé, who had been in the relationship from day one for his own gain. Sometime later, when the girl was chatting with some guy, she heard words of encouragement from a stranger for the first time. He said he understands how hard and painful it is for her after the betrayal. But after what happened, Ariana is convinced that she will never again take the word of guys who offer her something. But this stranger clearly had something to offer her, and the girl understood it perfectly well. As it turned out, he offered to help her get revenge on her fiancé. Working with this man, only one way to get revenge. Back to her real life, Ariana lived as an ordinary office worker. But at the age of 24, her life was abruptly cut short after a fall down a flight of stairs. Her first memory, her 7th birthday. She threw a tantrum because she didn't like the color of the dress her parents gave her. And at that moment, her health deteriorated and she fell down the stairs. Bright blonde hair, green, hateful eyes. And at that moment, the girl starts to realize that she's reincarnated as Ariana from the book Flower of the Realm. Flower of the Kingdom, a romance novel whose plot is about the struggle for the throne. Ariana is bullied by everyone, for she is the villain. Raised in one of the 3 largest aristocratic families in the country, which boast great power, the girl was an only daughter, so she grew up spoiled. The protagonist, Marie, from a low-status family, turns all the attention on herself. Prince Theodore falls in love with her at first sight, after which Ariana experienced unbearable humiliation. After such, she tries to complete this suffering and wants to perish, thereby deciding the aristocratic title of the Ariana. Enraged by public condemnation, teams up with the main villain of the story, plotting to get rid of the emperor. For such a humiliating act, her family is doomed to severe punishments. If the story follows the plot of the novel, she will definitely die as soon as she turns 19 years old. So, Ariana decided to change her life path by any means necessary. 12 years have passed since she decided to live her life as a villain and not get killed in the process. At the moment, Ariana is a socialite. She is recognized by so many people. She is on good terms with most aristocrats. When she shows up at any event, even people she's never seen before recognize her. She is admired by many because the girl looks simply gorgeous. She always has bright and beautiful outfits, which are difficult not to notice. Even the girls around her sometimes sincerely compliment her, and the opposite is said only by those who are obviously jealous of her. In addition to her magnificent beauty, she is also an excellent swordswoman. She's so good at it that some people have a hunch that Ariana may soon be considered for a knighthood. Before she had such a busy life and an entourage of mostly only aristocrats, when suddenly at one point a guy named Theodore comes up to her. He says she's the center of attention. Apparently this is the same fiancé who only considers her for his own gain, and the girl real behind is the protagonist. Her name is Marie, but during the introduction, she became very nervous because she felt unworthy to be around Ariana at that moment, even though Marie is the main character. And when the villainess asked why the girl started to get so nervous, because no one said anything bad to her, to which Marie replied that she just wanted to be friends with her. But the thing is, Marie isn't the only one who wants to be friends with Ariana, except that when the girl wasn't that popular and known among the aristocrats, that never happened. When she started to be noticed and admired, everyone who hadn't even looked at her or noticed her all these years suddenly became interested in being friends with Ariana. And it's obvious it's for a reason. These people are just trying to be more successful and recognizable with it. And luckily, the villain realizes this very well, because when she was no one wanted her, she was laughed at, and when she became a success, everyone abruptly wanted to be friends with her. Since the girl became too popular, it is understandable that among the fans were those who did not like her, but this is normal and peculiar to aristocratic society. Some of the people in such a society are those who are trying to find useful acquaintances and gain benefits by socializing with successful people. Some even attend these events as often as possible to make as many acquaintances as possible. As a result, it's safe to say that the plan to avoid the title of villainous, and most importantly, death, can be considered a success. But even with all the good things, there are still some things that need to be sorted out. And if it weren't for these moments, things would be so much better. When suddenly, Ariana spots the very villain who, in the future, will offer to help her get revenge on her ex-boyfriend. This guy's name is Prince Dylan. The girl hasn't seen him appear in public for years. People say he is now the governor of the border town of La Spade. And as it turns out, he's also Theodore's half-brother, Dylan Pasquier, the first prince of the Pasquier Empire. He is the final boss of the Flower Kingdom. To get the throne and the protagonist, he becomes the worst villain doing terrible things. And he is the man who brings a new defeat to the condemned Ariana. He was stripped of his right to the throne because he has the blood of a common man in him. But this is not yet confirmed. Spread by some aristocrats, who say he is destroying his enemies to ease his frustration over being disinvited from the throne. When the girl hears these rumors, she is very surprised, because it is where these people who have nothing to do with this person, and do not even have any idea what really happened, how they can discuss and spread rumors. Now it became clear to her that among aristocrats there are a lot of envious people who are just waiting for someone to have problems or troubles to discuss at such events. It's just an excuse for them to make fun of others, even though they're no better than the people they're discussing. When the emperor turned his attention to an ordinary girl, he broke off his engagement to Prince Dylan's mother, who was his official bride at the time. He overcame the condemnation of the aristocrats and married a man of a different social status. After Theodore's birth, his mother, who had become the emperor's official consort, died, and the emperor thereupon returned at once to his former fiancée, Dylan's mother. And it was soon discovered that the woman had a child, Dylan, who at the time of the breakdown of the relationship was being secretly brought up by the... And then the emperor found out that when he left this woman, she was pregnant with Dylan. But the emperor, who loved Theodore's mother more, passed the right to inherit the throne to him specifically. Now it's clear why they're always fighting. Theodore just took away Dylan's inheritance, for which Dylan is trying to get back at everyone involved. When the girl was 9 years old, and she hated the guy and beat him as hard as she could. Ariana will never forget the tea party that day. She happened to see Theodore almost drowning and asked for help. The girl was really scared for him, and when she saw his brother Dylan, she asked him why he wasn't trying to help, and the guy said he didn't need it. After all, if Theodore dies, it will only be better for him, because he will get the throne and become the happiest man alive. Ariana was convinced then how cruel he was, although on the other hand, he could really be understood, because the throne that was supposed to go to him had just been taken away from him. But just at that moment, the girl was very angry with him. She asked if he really thought he could be a good ruler if he got the throne because he left his brother to die. She told him bluntly that he didn't have the ability or strength to be emperor. And even if he becomes ruler, no matter what anyone says, she'll never respect him. To which the guy replied that she disrespected the first prince of this country, Dylan Pasquier, and at that moment, the guy promised that someday the moment would come and he would pay her back that debt. But what could that mean? Would he really want to get back at her for saying such words? It turns out that Ariana wasn't satisfied with a simple lifestyle change for fear that Dylan would still remember the situation and want revenge. So she decided to learn how to protect herself. After that incident, strangely enough, the girl never spoke to him once, and sometimes she was even afraid to be in his presence. And when the moment came, she turned 19. The girl became engaged to Reuben Balladur, a close aide to Crown Prince Theodore, who, as in the original story, was the son of the Duke of Balladur, one of the 3 largest noble families in the empire. This family is a branch of the Pasquier family, and has supported the imperial family for several generations. In the original story, these families were the leaders of the two main factions, and the relationship between them was very strained. The girl changed her lifestyle, and instead of a villain, she became a lady with good manners. And Ruben, a serious man, even though Ariana was a girl, she earned the reputation of the title of Big Rose due to her excellent sword skills. But all this time, the girl remembered the very moment when she hit Dylan, and absolutely every day she was afraid that someday he would decide to take revenge on her. But as she learns to protect herself, she begins to forget that she was once afraid of anything. Plus, she's now Ruben's wife, which gives her security and a comfortable life she's always dreamed of because it keeps her safe and prosperous. As suddenly, a lot of people came into the hall where the event was held, and they obviously didn't come to have a nice chat and meet the aristocrats. When they saw Ariana, they immediately surrounded her so she couldn't run away. Apparently they had come just for her. But is this really what Dylan's revenge she had feared so much all this time looked like? Except that there was one unexpected moment for them. Since the girl had learned how to wield a sword during this time, she would most likely be able to defend herself with ease. But as it turns out, Dylan had nothing to do with it. It was all him, her husband Ruben. He asked her to be obedient and not fight back. Why, he pulled out some paper. Apparently it was some kind of document. He let her see what it said. And as it turns out, it was a document that proved she did something bad that she should be punished for. That was the moment he started accusing her of treason. And from the look on his face, he was really serious. In her past life, in which she promised to live honorably and honestly, Ariana still became a villain. Ariana was really trying to live her life honestly to avoid the fate of doom. She's changed so much that she's been nicknamed the Big Rose, and as a result, she's being accused of something she has nothing to do with. Her fiancé accused her of a crime she didn't commit. It remains to be seen who benefited and why they are trying to accuse her of something she didn't participate in. When Ariana tried to explain that it was some kind of mistake, they wouldn't even listen to her and treated her very rudely so she couldn't fight back. She never thought that the person she trusted the most would just betray her for his own gain. And the worst thing in this situation is that she does not even have the opportunity to prove her innocence, because everything was done in such a way that she was not even given the opportunity to prove it. But that was not all. All around, sure, the girl has hostile relations with this country, and she is suspected of having ties with the Duchy of Glasvale, to which she replied that her family, the oldest knightly family, striving to be a model for the rest, she took an oath of absolute loyalty, so none of them have the right to accuse her of anything. And besides, she still hasn't heard any evidence that proves her guilty. When Ariana started to deny having secret ties with the enemy, she was told she couldn't fool them, and then shown some proof. But did someone prepare for this so well that they found evidence that would make it impossible for her to prove otherwise? At her father's behest, she was given charge of part of the territory, and while patrolling it, she helped a merchant who was attacked by bandits. The girl was only doing her duty, and at the same time, helping a stranger, for which he offered her a small gift as thanks for her help. He said that the girl would offend him greatly if she did not accept the gift. And of course it wasn't so hard to agree. She accepted the box and didn't even know what was in it. Ariana had no idea that such gratitude would be proof of her crime, which it really wasn't. But whether even then it was someone's carefully prepared plan, the girl even, without thinking, accepted this box, which was the biggest mistake of all. The fact is that the gemstone used as the decoration of this box is only produced and mined in the Duchy of Glazewell. Due to rarity and poor relations, this gemstone is forbidden in exports. Therefore, in this empire, there should be nothing like this. And since this gem was found in her room, but how they got into her room and for what purpose, no one has explained it. At first glance it didn't look like much, but a closer look revealed that the stone had a double structure, and it was probably enchanted with magic and held confidential documents, meaning she had been framed. Ariana was afraid of Prince Dylan's revenge because of the Tea Party incident, so she took up her sword in hopes of defending herself. But I was so much into fencing that I devoted all my time and attention to it, so I didn't know anything about jewelry given to beautiful ladies. Plus, they're heavy and get in the way while fencing, so obviously she didn't know anything about them. All of this was the result of her own inattention. However, very few people knew that she was not at all adept at jewelry. It was her parents and assistants at the mansion. As she listened to her husband's accusation, she was very uncomfortable being amongst the people looking around her. She felt guilty, even though she hadn't really done anything wrong, and unfortunately she can't even prove it, except that she did know something. Her husband really could be someone who could benefit from accusing her of something, and as a result, make some kind of profit. But at this point, she had no proof, and no way to accuse him of anything. And even if it were true, no one would believe her. No one would dare to agree with her, because they would be afraid to do so, because they might regret it very much. In the past, the girl had a very bad reputation. When someone noticed her at events, they were very surprised how she could attend these events because, in their opinion, she was unworthy to be here and socialize with respectable people. She often listened to criticism from aristocrats, but in fact, she was prepared for it. But perhaps the girl just overestimated her capabilities. A guy who was dancing with some girl was telling her when he took her hand. It was so stiff he felt like he was taking a man's hand. And of course it would be very unpleasant for any girl to hear something like that about herself. But at one point, when some guys were discussing it, her husband, who had just accused her, started defending her, which she definitely didn't expect. He said that the girl had chosen a difficult path and intended to go all the way, and if so, he asked her not to give up and not to look back. After all these words, Ariana finally stopped understanding him. He first starts accusing him of something and then a few minutes later, defends him. When those guys were discussing her hands, laughing at the fact that it was like they were masculine, the girl's husband looked like a real man, and if it wasn't for his accusations, things would have been so much better. But unfortunately she can't trust him anymore, because it's obvious he never truly loved her. All this time she was wrongly convinced he was different. Surprisingly, after a while, he started treating her again, as if just now he wasn't trying to protect her. At this point, his actions were really weird. And then he told me that he would take this opportunity to call off their engagement, and once upon a time, the girl thought she could live a quiet life with him, that they would support each other. But apparently in this relationship, she was the only one who thought that. And to realize it was very unpleasant, because when one trusts a person, to find out that it was not mutual, and someone was just trying to get an advantage, as a result, it was very hard to accept the fact that the person she knew turned out to be not at all what he turned out to be. From that moment on, she began to hate his looks, his voice, and everything about him. He did a terrible thing to her, because the girl had imagined a happy future, and as a result she was just betrayed, as suddenly the guy advised her to keep calm and not to act without thinking, if she wants to save the lives of her parents, because their fate completely depends on him. And when she heard about her parents, it was the moment when she had no patience. If she could, she would have taken revenge on him for his every word and bad act towards her long time ago. As it turns out, he's so ruthless, he doesn't even feel sorry for her parents, whose daughter didn't even do anything wrong. This man is just another proof that sometimes the most ordinary people, whom everyone respects and considers worthy of the title of prince, turn out to be even worse than the real villains. Villains at least take revenge on those who deserve it. They never blame those who don't even respond to it. They never do bad things if someone doesn't deserve it. But, for example, it's very easy for a prince to ruin the life of a person who was trying to be kind and caring all along, and who didn't wish anyone harm. Not only that, but he's even willing to hurt her parents. And the worst part of the situation is that he's doing it in such a way that no one can prove otherwise. This man is so confident and has so much power that even if someone has proof, no one can harm him. And even if they try, they will regret it very much. This is really very unfair to ordinary people who have no rights or opportunities to defend themselves or anyone else. After this situation, the faction of Imperial Prince Theodore raised the objection that the evidence of guilt was insufficient. So the charge was dropped, the punishment was cancelled, but he was sent to a monastery. The girl's parents were also detained. She still hasn't found out if they were released after the removal of the Balladur family used the whole situation as an excuse to suspect her family of rebellion. Emmanuel. Now her parents are under strict surveillance. And after this, a girl wants only one thing: revenge on those who hurt her family. Luckily, her dad and mom believed she wasn't involved in anything. They used their connections to clear Ariana of all charges. Some time ago, her parents gave her the sword she had dreamed of all along for her birthday. In fact, Her mom immediately admitted that she didn't want to give such a gift because it could be very dangerous. But since their daughter has dreamed of it, they're willing to do anything to make her happy and stand up for herself. They could clearly see how she was striving hard for her goal, not giving up, and getting stronger and stronger every day. So, of course, they decided to support her. The girl tearfully recalls all those beautiful moments when she was supported by her family. She was even more worried about her parents, because of her, they have to be under surveillance without any liberty. When suddenly some guys came to her and told her to pack up, because they were going to the monastery soon. They accompanied her all the way, and when others saw it, they never missed an opportunity to discuss her life and her actions. Most people would purposely discuss it loudly to make the girl feel more awkward and uncomfortable. And these were the very people who once tried to befriend her when she was a successful and happy girl, who never needed anything, and had no problems whatsoever. And those girls who used to envy her and wait for the moment when she would have it bad, finally got excited and looked at her with a smirk. It was the most satisfying thing for them, because now they have one less competitor, and that's all they need to be happy. As suddenly, Marie at that moment saw everything but didn't realize what was going on. Only one thing was obvious. Ariana was in some kind of trouble, except she didn't know the reason for it. She was the only one who genuinely cared about her and wanted to help without any self-interest. Meanwhile, Ariana was being led outside the palace, and at that moment, all those people who had been rejoicing came to the gate. And some people treated her so badly that they started throwing some objects they just found nearby. Now it was clear to her how all these aristocrats really treated her. At this moment, they showed their real face and attitude towards her. But they didn't think about what will happen when she corrects her reputation again and proves that she is not guilty of anything. And then it will be too late to apologize for her words and actions. It is not impossible that she will succeed, and everyone will answer for their words, all of them regretting that they once, that is now, behaved in such a way towards the girl. We can only hope that she comes up with some sort of plan and restores her reputation, except that after that, only she will be the one to laugh and look down on. But for now, all she can do is endure the humiliation and abuse of people who don't even know the real truth. She just needs to realize the most important thing, that in this situation, she shouldn't pay attention to those people who immediately believed she was guilty of something and didn't even try to help her. And the only people she has to think for are her parents. She really doesn't need to pay attention to those who cheer when she gets in trouble or has problems. Meanwhile, the man who would accompany her all the way warned that they had a very long journey ahead of them, and said that if she felt unwell, she could go to him for help. It was the only person who didn't try to offend her, and even offered to help, which was very nice. At this point, Ariana began to think and reason. Even if she lost her status and reputation, at least she still had her hands left over. Even if she doesn't know at all what exactly Ruben is planning, her proud Emmanuel family, who have always defended the empire, will never allow themselves to ignore injustice. When suddenly, as they were driving along peacefully, with nothing to portend trouble, they met some guy on the road. It was obvious that he would probably try to hurt them and turn out to be a villain. He waved some long device, but for what purpose it was not yet clear. The girl was very frightened, for she did not understand what his intentions were. From afar, the girl only glimpsed his hair color and silhouette, which seemed quite familiar to her. When suddenly, he purposely made it so that they could go no farther. The carriage turned over very abruptly. Everyone was very scared and did not know what to do in this situation, and Ariana could not move freely and defend herself because her hands were tied. As it turned out, a few more guys in black cloaks came up later. But what did they need to stop this particular map where Ariana was sitting for? They didn't look like they had good intentions at all. They looked too intimidating, and it was obvious they were following someone's orders. Then, one of them revealed that the girl's fiancé had paid generously for her. But what did that mean? And how did it relate to the fact that they had just stopped her? It turns out that someone paid for her to never breathe again, and regret something very much. These people were ordered to destroy her, but surprisingly, she didn't show any fear at all, but instead looked very confident despite the fact that her hands were tied, and she had no way to defend herself. She immediately ordered him not to touch her, and warned him that if he wanted to really hurt her, he had to be prepared in advance to answer for it. But this man didn't even listen to her. He had a clear order that he obeyed. At this point, he decided to make her unable to move. But when he saw that she couldn't do it anyway, he was very surprised. and realized that he wouldn't even have to try hard to do his master's bidding. All this time, Ariana, though she didn't show it, she was very much frightened by his appearance. He looks very intimidating indeed. Meanwhile, after this situation, those boys went to their master to tell him whether they had succeeded in their task or not. They began to report all the details of the work they had done. At his orders, the 8 assigned a number of men, who were sent on their way to the girls, to which the gentleman replied that he was very grateful for his work, and asked him to keep it up. At this point, the guy decided to wonder if people like them weren't suitable for cases that had to be performed in secret, so that no one would know or see it. They have excellent hearing and sense of smell, for which they have earned the nickname shadow hounds, so they are best suited for tracking. But their leader, he likes to have fun with those he catches, and usually, he often leaves footprints. So, the assistant decided to explain to the gentleman that if anyone found out the details of this incident, they would be in trouble. To which the gentleman replied that there was nothing wrong with that. After all, if they get rid of Emmanuel's family, the faction will be in total confusion. He said the young and inexperienced Crown Prince Theodore would not be able to fully command the remaining forces, so they would not be difficult to deal with. But still, it wasn't as easy and obvious as he says. He did have one problem that he still can't get over. Specifically, one person who will never allow this gentleman to feel invincible. It turns out that they want to get rid of Ariana, because that way there will be less trouble. And that's why he sent the Shadow Ones. Even after everything they've been through together, the girl was betrayed by this man, and somewhere still in the back of her heart, some part of him doesn't want to take it all in. The engagement to Reuben was done personally by the Emperor, as the union was between families from 2 opposing factions. Both families were not thrilled with the marriage, but for them, it was a forced measure. Her father asked her not to interfere in the political affairs of the 2 families as much as possible. No one congratulated her or blessed her, because the relationship, as it turns out, was only for the union and someone else's benefit. Because of this, she was always being accused of something, and especially for getting into fencing, which is something boys usually do. But the girl, as an intelligent person, understood and realized everything, so she just had to turn a blind eye to the whole situation. But surprisingly, the guy always helped and supported her. Reuben acted like a real man and protected his girlfriend, but as it turned out a few years later, it was not sincere and not real. And when she asked if he wasn't afraid that someday rumors would be spread about him too, and especially after someone saw him holding her hand, to which the guy always answered the same way, that he didn't care what anyone thought. All those years of relationships just didn't make sense. Everyone was constantly trying to cheat on her, and it was done even by people she definitely wouldn't have thought of. Ariana believed so strongly that Reuben was just a wonderful and most caring person that she wanted to be just like him. She really admired the man and was absolutely certain that there was no one better than him, but that she was very much mistaken. The girl is convinced of this only now. She is very offended that her fate was formed in this way. At this point, she's forced to communicate with a man who's been ordered to destroy her, and the fact that this conversation is pointless makes it all the more unpleasant, because she realizes that if she doesn't defend herself now, no one else will. So she starts to defend herself, and she seems to be getting pretty good at it. She must have learned something, and if she had the freedom of action, maybe she could have escaped a long time ago. She may seem like a very brave girl, but in reality, she's got no choice, and to improve her chances of survival, she has to fight to the last man. And even if there were several times as many people around to destroy her, she would still do it. It became obvious to her that some person had sent all these people to capture and destroy her, but she would never forgive them for that, and would take full revenge. Ariana tried to run away from them, but they decided not to give up and went after her, because if they came back and didn't complete the task, they would be in big trouble. The girl knows exactly who's behind all this, and who benefited from getting rid of her in this way. On the part of the person who came up with it, it's a very good option, because he won't have to show his face and take responsibility for the deed, because his assistants will do everything for him, who have spent their whole life doing this very thing. They will be able to do it much faster and better. But in this, they are very wrong. Ariana is not the kind of girl who is used to giving up, especially when it comes to survival, because at the moment, she is responsible not only for herself, but also for her parents, who are not to blame for anything. How suddenly, the girl makes a completely different decision, and instead of just running away, she comes up with a different strategy that she can do much better at. And it's not hard to guess what the plan is. At some point, all these villains stop noticing her. Is she just hiding somewhere and waiting for the right moment? From their reactions and surprise, I get the impression that they started to be a little afraid of her, and stopped being so sure of themselves. Because of fear, one of them started talking to her even though he had lost sight of her. He asked in a trembling voice if they had started playing catch-up and hide-and-seek. When he thought he had found her behind a tree, it was a deception. The girl had torn apart from her dress to lead him into a trap, which he had successfully believed in. And it was at this point, when he began to wonder how she could have done it, and when she had time to do it, that the girl wasted no opportunity and began to get down to business. She was behind him and prepared to inflict a blow to get back at him for trying and destroy him, and for every bad word he'd said in her direction. It just so happens that he somehow managed to react in time to notice someone starting to approach him. When she wanted to strike him, he grabbed her and prevented her from doing so. The girl was once again without freedom of action, and didn't know what to do next. He at once began to laugh that she had made such a decoy, and herself suddenly attacked by a leap from a tree. The man commented that such an idea was pretty good, but the execution was not the best. Her main mistake was that the girl made too much noise and didn't think about it at all beforehand. The villain immediately heard some rustle and managed to get ahead of her. She was very angry with herself, for if she had thought out her plan more carefully, it would have been very different. But unfortunately, it had not worked out that way. But this time, he was even angrier than he was originally. And now, he wouldn't let her run anywhere. Apparently, it would be much better if the girl just ran away and didn't stop. After that, she's acting weird now, so he's probably going to do the same thing to her that he usually does to people he catches, especially girls. She was beginning to hate the look in his eyes and what he was saying to her. He looked so unpleasant that she didn't have the patience or strength to be in his presence. When suddenly, he started to calm her down and said he wasn't going to destroy her. He was interested in something else. He enjoys more watching someone being afraid of him or not knowing what they are going to do at any moment. Seeing fear in people's eyes is more interesting to him than just getting rid of someone. Ariana was as disgusted as possible to look at him and listen to what he was saying. She began to wish that her hands weren't blocked. When suddenly, something unexpected started happening. This man immediately pulled away from her and started holding his head. The girl didn't understand what was going on. It was as if some kind of power or magic had acted on this villain that hurt him. And at that moment, Ariana began to hear someone approaching them. She hoped that this person had come to her rescue, because if it was another villain, she just couldn't stand it and would definitely die. She can barely handle one of them, and if there are more, she really might not be able to handle it. But apparently it wasn't one of these villains, but a completely different person. But how did he get here? Did he really come to save the girl? But then how could he know she was in danger? It was really very unexpected when the villain tried to prevent and make sure he didn't approach them. It was to no avail. But how come the villain was scared of the most ordinary man and could not do anything? Apparently he is not so strong and is able to scare only defenseless girls. And to cope with some guy, he cannot do anything. This guy looks like a real hero. He was not afraid to protect the girl from a real villain, but as it turned out in reality, he is not a villain. He is only able to scare the weak. It would be a shame if this guy came to protect her just so he could make some kind of profit like the rest of us. We can only hope that this is not the case, and that he is a true hero who did not let the girl be hurt, and did it only to protect her, and to punish those who dared to do such a thing to her. Because whoever took advantage of a moment when she was defenseless and unable to move normally should be held accountable. And as a result, he succeeded. He destroyed the enemy, and thus saved the girl. Because there is no telling what would have happened if the villain had continued to do what he wanted to do. Except there's one very important thing. This guy is the same Dylan she's been so afraid to see all this time. When he tackled the enemy, started asking her a lot of questions. But did he really save her just to personally avenge what happened in the past? He began to think back and ask her if she remembered how she had acted toward him when he, like her now, could not defend himself against the man who was trying to hurt him. But she couldn't answer him because she only wanted to know one thing: how he got here, and why he needed to save the girl he wanted revenge on. And at one point, he suddenly stopped asking her questions that had to do with the past, and instead asked her how she was feeling. But before answering this question, the girl thought how incredibly amazing everything that is happening is. Because after one villain, she is forced to communicate with another one, who wants to destroy her as much as the previous one. So Ariana doesn't understand how to react to it, and how to behave in this situation, because any word can both help and hurt her. But as it turned out, he had a good offer for her. Dylan started to look at her in a completely different way, and offered her something very interesting. But the girl is sure that she should not make another mistake, for which she will regret later. It turns out that the guy offered her to take revenge on her ex-fiancé. And of course, that sounds tempting enough, because it's the one thing she truly desires. This girl, I didn't like her from the start. That's when the harassment at work started. The first missing item was an umbrella she had just recently bought. When she arrived at work one more time, she found a broken cup, and the fountain pen her brother gave her was found in the trash. Her co-workers were constantly discussing how she thought she was special, just because she worked a little harder than the rest of us. It was very hard to work in such conditions and with such people. But somehow, she still stayed at work because she hoped that things could be fixed. But unfortunately, no matter how hard she tried to get along with the staff, it never worked out. None of them wanted to socialize properly, and instead started a new thread about her trying to renew her reputation and make friends with everyone, and as a result, she made it even worse. But since now was her only chance to make things right and get a mentor or a helper, she decided to listen to Dylan's suggestion. He started to free her hands with a special key, and at the same time said that apparently they had something to discuss. They at least had a common goal: to get revenge on one person. Dylan began to tell her that her fiancé had decided that it was more advantageous to destroy her, since there was a chance that she would escape from the convent, so the men who had received orders to catch her would soon be on their way here. Well, as it turned out, he wasn't alone either. He had one of his subordinates with him, the one he trusts most. They stopped the carriage, and don't realize how bad a decision and mistake it was on their part. Dylan said that her wariness was justified, but he thought it would be more beneficial for them if she believed that, at the moment, he was on her side and could be trusted. Meanwhile, as he searched for a spare key, accidentally found the sword and asked if she was able to defend herself in case of danger. But the girl was so tired at this point, she had no motivation or desire to do anything. She wasn't even happy about the fact that she wouldn't be alone now. Ariana no longer understood the point of defending herself if she didn't even have someone she wanted to survive for. She has no friends, no one to love her, no one but her parents to wait for her and be happy when they see her. She began to tell me that she mistakenly thought she had any chance of starting over and creating a new happy life that would be better than the previous one. She was really sure it was all within her grasp. But it turned out that wasn't quite true. She imagined everything completely differently and dreamed that someone would love her someday. But all her efforts were in vain. She became convinced that she would never be able to change her fate. All this time, the guy had been listening intently to what she was saying, and as it turned out, he'd never imagined that she had so many problems and worries. And when he realized that she was really alone in trying to change her life for the better, and didn't want to hurt anyone, he started to look at her very differently. He seriously imagined how hard and unpleasant it had been for her, after the man she truly loved and trusted had accused her of betrayal, and in doing so, had done it on purpose. Dylan felt very sorry for the girl, because he never thought that she had to deal with all these problems alone, which were just imposed on her for nothing. She'd forgotten the last time she'd done anything wrong, and even so, she'd still found something to blame, and it was the people she thought were closest to her. At one point, it was even hard for her to stop crying. The guy had definitely decided that she needed help with this, because she definitely couldn't handle it all without someone's help. He immediately went over to her and tried to calm her down. She looked in his eyes like a very weak girl who wanted to be protected and comforted. Plus, there's definitely no one else who will ever do it but him, and since she realizes that, it makes her feel even worse. As suddenly, he started asking her how many people admire the beautiful flowers in the fields, but they still walk on them, and how many people would want to help her. But the girl wasn't quite sure what it all meant. To which he replied that many of these people would probably never know that they had trampled on a beautiful flower, so they would go on living without knowing it. And yet, the stem of the flower was broken, the leaves were torn, the root was still alive. And is there nothing in this world more so disgusting than just sitting around crying and expecting an even sadder ending? And he does have a good point in his words. Dylan explained that he just didn't want to wait for the flower to wilt completely. Even if it has the strength to crawl on the ground, it will still grow roots because it wants to live. He will definitely do everything possible to feel happiness again, because he knows that all this is definitely waiting for him in the future. The main thing is not to give up. Four-leaf clover symbolizes happiness and good luck. It is said to be found only in places where many people and animals pass by. And the big rose, the most beautiful flower in the entire empire. Then, he asked her another question. Did she really just want to give up and agree to something horrible? When the girl tried to reply something to this, the guy for some reason didn't wait for it, and said the following. Since he's been talking too long, he doesn't have time to rest. He needs to go deal with the remaining enemies. And then reminded her that if she wanted to, she could continue to sit there and do nothing, and also think it was a hopeless situation. And even after he'd told her all this, she had a chance to go along with it. Or on the contrary, to leave it as it was and do nothing about it. But the main thing he wanted to explain to her was that if she didn't give up and went with him, he could protect her. But since she wasn't even going to get up and answer him, he just decided to say goodbye, because there was no time to stay and keep explaining things to her. He really had a lot of things to do. Besides, he did his best to help her and explain that she could always do nothing and give up. And she had a chance to take revenge on her fiancé only now. But would she still continue to feel sorry for herself and inaction? She just got a great chance to pursue her dreams with this guy. They would have a common goal, and it would be so much easier to deal with adversity. Once every 6 months, she and her family would go on a trip, a rule that was established when the girl started living on her own and got a job. She was looking forward to it because she loved spending time with her family. But there was a very unpleasant situation. One day, her father died of illness before she remembers herself, so she knows his face only from photos. Her mother raised her alone. After graduating from high school, her brother went straight to work, started saving money for her studies. As Ariana got a job offer at her current company, her brother was so happy, as if it was his own job. Jay gave her a fountain pen as congratulations on getting a new job. At some point, she had a bad situation at work that almost made her lose it. But fortunately, she was able to avoid being held responsible for a serious incident. So, in the future, she planned to thank whoever helped her with that. It was an ordinary day. The girl came home after work and wanted to rest. And at this moment, the girl begins to notice something suspicious. The light was off, and the car in the yard did not stand. But because someone had told her that they would be home at that time, and in fact no one was, the girl immediately thought that something strange had happened and needed to make sure that this person was okay. When her acquaintances at work started discussing her personal life, she could not answer anyone that it was none of their business and that they had no right to interfere in her life, which was none of their business. And since her co-workers were well aware that she could never stand up for herself, they all joked about her constantly and could afford to treat her badly with complete confidence. But at some point, she couldn't take it anymore and decided that she couldn't go on like this, because what right did they have to treat her like this? Even though she hadn't done anything bad to them, she never even once looked in their direction or said a single word to them for which they could be so treated. She was so sick of the trouble around her that she couldn't stand it anymore. Plus, if those who constantly bullied her hadn't done it, her brother and mom would be alive. How suddenly, when she tried to stand up for herself, someone pushed her down the stairs, and if it wasn't for that conversation, her life would never have changed. So she had a very strong desire to change everything forever for the better, and never remember this period of her life as a bad dream. As a result, she gets a new life. But even when there is a second chance to fix everything, the girl continues to do nothing and blame everyone around her for her failures. Because just now, her boyfriend personally suggested that we do it together, because it would be so much easier and more effective. And surprisingly, when Dylan tried to deal with the villains on his own, the girl found the strength to stand up. She began to analyze what was happening. and saw that the man she had been riding with in the carriage recently was trying to destroy her. And since he was the only one who had been polite to her, she decided to protect him, or at least try to do so. She knows full well that he's one of the few who doesn't deserve something bad in his direction. As she began to remember this man, the girl thought about the fact that if she didn't do something now, an innocent person would get hurt. And if a girl just keeps feeling sorry for herself and thinking she's not capable of anything, she'll end up in his shoes, which she'll regret. It turns out that a long time ago, a girl saved his child, for which he is madly grateful, and will remember it for the rest of his life. But since there was no time to remember what had happened before, the girl decided to pull herself together and take action. Since Dylan had taken on several villains, there was no way he could help her save her grandfather, so she had to come up with something on her own. The guy and his assistant were very good at what they did, but unfortunately, they couldn't handle all the baddies at the same time. They were so busy and focused on their work that they didn't notice the girl joining them at all. And surprisingly, during the battle, they remained calm. It was obvious from their gaze and reaction to what was happening that everything was under control. Each of them did their job perfectly, as if they do it all the time. Ariana admired their skill and calmness in that moment. When the girl saw that she was not alone, and that there were those who could protect and support her at the right moment, she really felt better. She even began to feel more confident, because she was not alone. All these villains are doomed to die, because there is no enemy stronger than someone who wants revenge for all the bad things he suffered, because of someone. They have so much motivation and anger that no opponent can resist and defeat the three of them. In addition, none of them were at all afraid to fight for their freedom and happiness, which made the enemy afraid and nervous. At some point, which was very strange, there was a conflict between the two guys that even they didn't expect, but it turns out it only looked that way from the outside. One of them just hit the other, so they just wanted to make a joke and draw the opponent's attention to it. Actually, it was fine. This way they just made the enemy less focused on the battle, and thus made it much easier to defeat him. It's amazing that quite a lot of time has passed, but they still keep fighting. Do they really have so much strength that they are able to endure such physical exertion for many hours in a row? But on the other hand, they wouldn't have the title of prince or knight if they were weak and not tough like real knights, that are actually able to withstand such loads for several hours in a row, which a normal person without training cannot do. As suddenly, Dylan hears some voice. As it turned out, it was the exact moment when the girl was ready to help them. She offered her help, and asked for the strongest opponent she could handle in his place. It was very surprising to him. The guy had already accepted the fact that she would never want to take things into her own hands and pursue her goal on her own to the last, not relying on anyone else for anything. When he asked her if she was tired of feeling unhappy and sad under the tree, he expected to hear that she understood and would no longer wait for a miracle and would try to do something for her own happiness and safety. And instead of talking about it, the girl just started to resent how he could defend himself so weakly against an opponent. And was she really going to show that she could handle it so much better than he did? To which he replied that his task is not only to react in time, but also to analyze what is happening. And this is not unimportant. The point is that the girl once again doesn't want to lose everything because of the injustice that has suddenly fallen upon her, so that the people who matter to her can look to their future with confidence. That's what she needed to learn how to wield a sword for, because if she couldn't, in this situation, she wouldn't stand a chance. But every day, everything is getting more and more confusing, even though this guy has offered to help her. But the girl still cannot completely trust him, because he probably still has a desire for revenge. Plus, he's the half-brother of the man she's suffering from now. She really dislikes the whole situation. Despite someone's help, these people could still be dangerous, or are someone who still can't be trusted. As Ariana finally made up her mind and looked into the eyes of her opponents, she was not at all frightened by the fact that they were much more numerous and that they could be much stronger, which the girl even doubted. She had a smile on her face and the absolute confidence in her actions that she had been missing for so long. Apparently she was really helped by the guy's words, and she realized something after all. The minister invited aristocrats from all over the world to entertain them in his circle of socializing, but he didn't even think they should have been vetted. All of them had only bad intentions. His daughter got her nickname and widespread fame due to protecting Theodore. After this incident, She became famous among aristocrats and common people alike. However, her nickname was originally Scarlet Rose, 23 criminals masquerading as a group of artists, and the girl alone destroyed them all. She got her nickname because even after a lot of people died, she was always smiling. Meanwhile, she's trying to show by example that you should never underestimate your opponent. Dylan simply stopped recognizing the girl who only a few minutes ago looked as helpless as possible and didn't know what to do next. And when he saw how well she began to deal with these villains, that she didn't have an ounce of fear or insecurity in her eyes, he was really surprised, because most likely, he just didn't know that she used to do fencing before. She took on several opponents at once with ease, and it was quite amazing to watch the girl handle them much better than the actual knights did. She somehow miraculously has a lot of energy and strength to fight for her freedom and happiness, which is a very good thing, because in this way, she will become even more self-confident. And that's what she missed so much. The girl had already forgotten what it was like to not know what fear was, or that there was no one who could defeat her. I guess this is when her life will finally start to turn around like she's dreamed. Surprisingly, Dylan didn't even have to help her. She alone, the girl, handled alone several opponents at once and didn't even need help. When she went out to fight against them, it only took her a few minutes, though the boys could not defeat them for hours, to which the girl replied that this amount of villains and time was not enough even for a warm-up, and why she asked if her ex-husband could think that these people were enough for them to destroy and defeat her. It was ridiculous to her, because he knew that she used to be a fencer and could fight several groups of them at once without any help. Not so long ago, Ariana couldn't answer him or comment on what was happening, but now everything had changed. Dylan couldn't find the words to comment on his surprise at what was happening. He never thought he would see her so strong and determined even in such a difficult situation. For her to understand why he was offering to get revenge on her fiancé and how he could benefit from it. But instead of discussing it, the girl went straight to that man. She was worried about him and wanted to help if needed. She had a lot to say to the guys, of course, but it was more important to her to make sure that this man was okay and that no one hurt him. Then, she went straight to him and inquired if he had the strength to get to his feet. And at that exact moment, the guy somehow didn't care about the man's condition, but instead started talking to the girl who didn't care about it. He talked about how at some point he started to get nervous that she would never try to do anything to change her fate and take revenge on those who deserved it. But he didn't even realize that he was also one of the people she still didn't trust, because he had no reason to help her, and it was obvious that he wasn't doing it just to help her, but for his own gain, just like everyone else. At one point she pointed her sword at him, to which the guy replied that she shouldn't do that, because she knows that she can't point a sword at a prince. But no matter how much he tries to scare her or see her, he can't. Because after all the situations she's been through, she's not afraid of anything, and she can't be scared of anything. Though the guy tried to pretend he was confident, after seeing how good she was with the sword, and that she could defend herself, he was a bit afraid, and didn't know what to do in this situation, because obviously she has a much better chance of winning. Plus the girl told him that she doesn't see him as a prince, and that this situation proved that she's much stronger than he is. Ariana didn't forget to thank him for his help, because if it wasn't for his words, she would never have decided to do this deed. But there is one, but she knows full well that this guy uses people as tools all the time, so she has no reason to trust him, to which the guy asked that if she really felt that way, she wouldn't be defending him right now. He said she thought he was a horrible person and wasn't going to forgive him for anything, yet she still picked up the sword and helped. And that contradicts what she said. Afterward, Ariana became convinced that he was purposely not helping her grandfather to get her to help them, which made her very angry. The guy explained that he realized that she couldn't forgive him, but he also asked if it wouldn't be easier to act together so they could help each other, and because of that cooperation, a lot less people would die. But even in this situation, it's completely obvious to her that he's just trying to manipulate, only to have her only agree to his proposal. And in that moment, all her assumptions were justified, and these two were not what they tried to appear to be. They really are the real villains who never tell the real truth. After her words that she wasn't going to trust them and act together, they had no other choice but to try to get rid of the new adversary. As expected, the girl was right not to trust them. These people had just offered to cooperate, and now they were trying to hurt her. But that wasn't all. Since it wasn't profitable for them to get rid of her, they decided to warn that this man should die instead of her. It's very interesting to see what the girl will do after all, and whether she will stand idly by when the villains are about to destroy an innocent man. Despite this situation, Ariana still tried to remain calm and not show her true emotions, because if they saw fear in her eyes, it would be even worse. At that moment, the girl seriously thought that for the moment, it might even be a good idea to accept his proposal, because in case of anything, she could defend herself at any time. And if she gives her consent, that man will not be touched or harmed. And as much as she would like to destroy this man, she is forced to consider what would be the best thing for her to do in this situation. In any case, even if she agrees to cooperate, she will no longer be manipulated into believing in someone else's honesty. She will do everything she can to ensure that only she benefits. Now, no one can make her feel bad or sad as a result. She will forever forget what it's like, and learn what it is to think only about herself and her own benefit.